special deal today. We thought I had heard about this gentleman, and he comes highly recommended. So we'll be the judge of that in a few minutes. So I'm sure if you listen to Holiday Inn, that's maybe not even on here. I guess it is. But my wife has listened to Holiday Inn stories about Christmas and music. Like how many days? What about 29 days before Christmas?
Yeah. It starts the day after Thanksgiving.
And if you've heard any of that on Kello Radio in Sioux Falls, you've heard this gentleman. You might even recognize his voice. Jeff Gould, and he's going to talk about the 36-year funeral of Abraham Lincoln. Well, I'd hate to keep somebody for 36 years. But at any rate, Jeff is from Sioux Falls. He does need funding for Boom and Miller down there. I can't believe I'm saying those two names. Yeah. And but he also is very active in his community and in Harrisburg, and has a family and a wife and four daughters, and a 125-year-old house. So you're used to
Absolutely, yeah.
an old house like that. So why don't we welcome Jeff Gould?
It is my pleasure to be here. I believe my voice will carry to the way back, where we must have some Lutherans who can't break the habit. I know this is free, because if this is a concert, you'd all be sitting in the front row. But that's okay. I'm here to talk about the 36-year funeral of Abraham Lincoln. And it is fascinating. A gentleman was talking to me, how did I get involved with this in the first place? Well, I started working for the funeral homes in Sioux Falls about 9 years ago. And then one of the guys who said, well, you must know about Abraham Lincoln's coffin. And I said, well, no. Well, tell me about it. Well, there is a replica of the casket that goes around the country. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, well, could it be possible to bring to town? Absolutely. So just call up the casket guy from Batesville, and I did. I talked to him, and I said, is it true that you have a replica of Abraham Lincoln's coffin? And he said, no, we have 5. 2 are on permanent display at museums, and 3 go around the country. All you have to do is request it, and we make sure you get it. I said, it's that easy? He said, yes. Well, put my name on the list. He said, it's on the list. I said, when am I going to get it? 18 months. That was the waiting period, and that is the popularity for a box that resembles another box that a man was buried in almost 150 years ago. Now, what is that about? I mean, look at you. You're here today to see a box that resembles a box that a man was buried in. Well, the man is Abraham Lincoln. And before we talk about what his impact was in death, which is affecting us to this day, let us talk about his life and what it is about him that is so important today. You know, they'll do a survey. They'll say, historians of the world, Americans, whatever, tell us a name of an American who has affected national, international things. Pick up some names, and 3 names are constantly mentioned. I'm going to take one of those names. It's Abraham Lincoln. Who are the other 2, please? I heard George Washington. You're correct. Thomas Jefferson is not on the list. It is not a president. It's not a president. Benjamin Franklin for 400. Very good, sir. All right. To the bonus round. Yes, those 3 names are mentioned. Lincoln seems to be escalating in his popularity. The other 2 are waning somewhat. It'd be an interesting question as to see why. But Lincoln is a global figure. Mount Rushmore is the 3rd largest tourist attraction in the nation, which says something considering it's in the middle of the country. I've had a chance to give this presentation all over the place. I gave it at Mount Rushmore, in the theater there. I talked to the curator. I gave it on his birthday. It was a great day. I was talking to the curator, and he said, you know, they come from all over the world, and they stand in that proscenium, you know the one I'm talking about, and they all point to the same president, Lincoln. And they nod. They don't necessarily even speak English, but there is something about him that is globally attractive. Well, my goodness gracious, you sure wouldn't have thought it in 1860, because here is the issue that faces the nation. We're in an election year this year. I think history works best when you apply it to current events. We are hearing these days that we are hopelessly divided in this country. Democrats and Republicans, a division that cannot be crossed over. Never has been worse, I hear. Well, those people need to spend a little time reading their history, because it's been a lot worse at a lot of different times. And this is one of those times. The nation is not cut into, three pieces. It's cut into four over this particular issue, which is... Who said slavery? Yes, good job. Give yourself extra points. Slavery is the issue that divides the nation, and George Washington and the Founding Fathers knew this would be a problem, because we have two completely different philosophies of how the country and the economy is to work. In the North, they do not view slavery as immoral. They view it as inefficient. Adam Smith, who's a famous economist of the time, says, no, it's a matter of machinery. That is how you grow an economy. With mills and factories and railroads, and the Industrial Revolution takes off in the North. In fact, there are more, in the year 1860, there are more miles of railroad in the North than in the rest of the world combined. The South is still using the old method, slavery, to grow predominantly cotton. The North looks at the idea of an overarching union of a federal government as being a good idea, mainly because it would help as they go across state lines for railroads and those other kinds of things. They see a possible, use of using some sort of federal laws that would overarch state laws. In the South, they still like the idea of states' rights. I get to do what I want to do in my state. That's my state rights. It's important to realize that at this time, there is no such thing as the United States of America. There is no such thing as the United States of America. It is referred to as these United States of America. And people saw it as a collection of states, and people would say, no, I am an American. Yes, but really, I'm a New Yorker. Really, I'm a Pennsylvanian. Really, I'm a Texan. Well, they still think that. But, this is the way it was in 1860. But this brand new party called the Republican Party is about to switch everything around, because they have a very strong platform. It's based on this: no expansion of slavery, and all of the incoming immigrants love this idea. Remember, the incoming immigrants don't necessarily care about slavery as a moral issue either. They just don't want the competition. So when they're coming from Europe to our shores, now I can work on the railroad or whatever, and I don't have to worry about my job being taken away by a slave. So this incoming voter force loves the idea of the Republican Party. The Republican Party wants a strong union to help build all these railroads and things like that. And of course, the people who own the railroads and the factories and the canals, they like this, and they're providing a little bit of the money to help get this thing going. And then the third party is the abolitionists, who are considered a radical group, but they still have some power. They are against slavery for moral purposes. And look at the population in the North, and you can see that if the Republican Party whoever the Republican Party gets is going to win the election. Extremely disturbing in the South. You remember the idea in the 2000 election about hanging chads and voter fraud? In the South, there is not even the Republican nominee listed on the ballot. That's how divisive it is. Before the votes are even counted, we already have states leaving the Union. And it's obvious to everybody in this election process that the most powerful Republican is going to be nominated. And the most powerful and liked Republican is, without a doubt, William Seward. There's only one problem with William Seward. As powerful as he is, as intelligent as he is, as popular as he is also hated. How can that be? Is anybody here a fan of the New York Yankees? There's always one. Everybody, and what? They're a powerful baseball franchise. No doubt about it. And nobody likes them if they're not a Yankees fan. I'm a Twins fan. I root for anybody who plays the Yankees. Well, so it is. William Seward has his group of people that are his followers, but when it comes to the convention in Chicago, he cannot get the majority. So he goes to the number 2 guy, which might be argued as Salmon Chase, and Salmon Chase doesn't like him, and he won't throw in with him. And neither will Edwin Stanton. There's only this 4th guy who everybody kind of likes, although he's a stranger. His name is Abraham Lincoln. I mean, they kind of know him in the party. He has some things going for him. First off, he's from the sticks. He's from Illinois. They see the expansion of the country moving west, and that, this might be helpful to have, a guy from there. Also, he's not particularly well known, so that means he doesn't have any enemies. He's very likable. Whenever Abraham Lincoln is in a room, there's a crowd of people around him because he's very funny. He tells great stories, and people like him. He is seen as amiable, although somewhat of a hick or incompetent, because he is strange looking. He might even be called ugly. Now, you can't say that about Abraham Lincoln. Well, you would back then. If there was a political cartoon of Abraham Lincoln, he would be shown looking as a baboon or a monkey. He is freakishly tall. He is 6'4", when the average person is about like so. Okay. He is 165 pounds. He does not have the voice you think he has. 7 years ago. No. He has a high-pitched tenor voice that will go shrill if he's making a point. He has a habit when he speaks of becoming animated and going down on his knees and pulling his elbow and tugging his ear and kind of doing this. He looks like a puppet on a string. And people, when they see him, involuntarily laugh at him. But like I said, he is a master storyteller. He's extremely bright. Remember now, who wrote the Gettysburg Address? I mean, since then we hire speechwriters in a vain attempt to even come close to what that man with no education did in himself. Abraham Lincoln is brilliant. And like I say, he's fun. He knows how to work a crowd. My opponent says I am two-faced. Now, I'll tell you something. If I was two-faced, would I use this one? So they laugh like so, and he'd tell another joke and a story, and he'd get his anecdotes, and eventually he does become the Republican nominee. And you think life is good. No, it's bad, because that means he gets into office with only 40% of the popular vote, which means 60% of the people don't like him. We know when a president gets elected now, they get that 100-day honeymoon period. No, they hate him out of the gate. There is an assassination plot on his life on the way to the inauguration. It is not a tragedy that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. It is a miracle that he made it as long as he did. Well, we know what happens. By the way, his popularity is never secure. He is viewed by people who like him as a likable guy who's mismanaging things, or just a guy who's a complete imbecile who should be taken out. Why is this? Current events. Popularities for sitting presidents diminishes in a time of war the longer the war goes on because they're expensive. They cost money and they cost lives. How many people have died in the Iraq and Afghanistan conflict? 7,000, maybe 8,000, something like that? It's a lot of people. And people do not like it. We want it to be done. In just one battle, 1 year into this, the Battle of Shiloh, 13,000 Union troops are killed, and 11,000 Confederate troops are killed. That's 24,000 men, boys, husbands, sons, brothers, uncles, killed in 2 days.
Now, where's the rest of them? Because there's a law.
You would walk across the battlefield of Shiloh, and you could not touch the ground. There were too many bodies. To explain it this way, this probably explains it better than anything else. The invention that comes out of the Civil War is dog tags. Because before then, there were always enough survivors to identify who died. In this war, entire companies are killed. And now the dead are anonymous. And now this new industrial revolution that invented all these machines of war has to come up with another invention, dog tags. Bob, if you have some people coming in, you want me to just stop for a little bit? We'll have these people sit down. We can certainly do that.
Come on in, he's going to take a break.
Come on in. Come on in. Make them sit at the front.
Yeah, they've been filtering in, so they've missed some of your comments, but we're glad to
I
have
was
them.
just stalling the stuff I was saying.
You want to come in up a ways, or maybe come up here, Arliss?
Come on in.
Come on up a little way.
All the way to the front.
Okay, just whatever, you take her whenever you want. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Okay. All right. Yeah. You want to come in a way? Or there's lots of them right there. It's up to you. You take it.
Is that everybody? We're on to our next slide here. And so,
I think go ahead. Yep, that's fine. Okay.
So here's what happens. Miracle of miracles, the North starts to actually win battles towards the end of Lincoln's administration. He is astonished, I mean literally astonished, that he wins re-election. He was so certain that he would not. He wins. And then we start to win even more battles until in April, Robert E. Lee surrenders his army. Now the war is not over, but that's a big, big step. And everybody is celebrating. It is Good Friday, 1865. And Mary Todd Lincoln, his wife, said, let's celebrate, let's go see a movie. Well, there are no movies, but there are plays. And there's a really funny play at Ford's Theater called My American Cousin. And people love it. And Abraham Lincoln, who has been melancholy and down most of the war, that day, people comment they have never seen him happier. He's tired, though, and at the last minute he says, you know, I just don't think I'm going. And his wife said, but everyone's going to be there. The crowd is full of Union soldiers. They're going to want to see it. So he says, okay, I'll go. And we know what happens. He is shot in the back of the head by John Wilkes Booth, who would be the most popular actor in America. It would be, and that's why there's no conspiracy theory about who it is. He would be like George Clooney or a Brad Pitt. He was that much of a sensation. He jumps on the stage and says, "Sic semper tyrannis," so it is with tyrants, and he runs off. And Abraham Lincoln lingers into the morning. He dies on Saturday morning at 7:22 a.m. This was such a pivotal moment. Do you know that if you bought a clock after the Civil War, all the way up to World War I, all the clocks in the clock store were set at 7:22. It was a time that everybody knew about. He dies. And now we see something that we've never seen before. It is the biggest funeral in history. Numerically, more people were at Kennedy's. But in terms of the proportion of the population and its impact on the country, nothing can compare to Lincoln's funeral. It's enormous. They make an announcement that he will be viewed by the public, and they make it at 8 o'clock in the morning, and by noon, there is a line of people 2 miles long and 8 people across. And it just starts to roll on from there. 8 million people have some part in either the funeral train or visitations or funeral services. That's like a third of the northern population. Now why? Remember, we had 400 to 600 to 1.6 million casualties in the Civil War, depending on how you do that. Remember, many of those sons, husbands, whoever, did not have a funeral per se. And you know what this is like? When you go to a wedding, you think of your own wedding. You go to a birth, you think of your own birth or baptism, things like that. At a funeral, you think of the other people you've known who have died. When he died, it brought back all the grief of their own family members who have died, and they just felt this compulsion to go to his funeral as a surrogate for their own. Also, guilt. Guilt. Remember, he was unpopular during his presidency. They thought he was doing a bad job. Well, now that the war is over, there's nobody to apologize to. So they go. And if they can't go, what can they do to show that they support his efforts? Well, like I said, I'm a Twins fan. I couldn't go to the World Series in 1987 or 1991, but what could I have in my house that I could wave at the TV set? A Homer Hanky. Remember the Homer Hankies? What did Americans fly in their homes to symbolize their support for a man who sacrificed for the nation? Yeah, the flag. Americans use the flag more than other countries use their flags. It's more important to who we are as a nation than it is to other nations. And this could go back to Lincoln's funeral, because it's after this time that we become really flag invested. And we'll show more about that flag as we continue further. At any rate, this is the catafalque which is built, and you can see that there's many people in attendance, and one of the reasons is that he is embalmed. We see here the cost of Lincoln's funeral, $8,900. Included in the cost of that is embalming. Embalming was considered unnatural, macabre, grotesque, unsuitable by virtually every American, with one exception for sure, that was Lincoln himself. Lincoln liked embalming. Lincoln liked inventions. He liked new things. And when he heard about this new science that would replace the blood in your bloodstream with some sort of a liquid-based arsenic, lead, or zinc chemicals to preserve the body, he thought it was a great idea. In fact, he had his son embalmed when he died in Washington, D.C., and so he is embalmed. And he's re-embalmed, and then re-embalmed as he makes his way back home. We'll show that later. But that embalming allows people to see him for 20 days. Couldn't happen without embalming. We now take embalming as something that just is around. We don't even think about it. To see a body one last time is to say goodbye one last time. How important is that? Well, back in the day, it was important enough that they would spend $10,000, our money, back then, just to see that person one last time. Now let's look at our current events. 9/11. Those families are still struggling because they never saw the body, and not all of them have figured out that that person is dead. Despite all of the other evidence, maybe. An embalmed body is not a beauty contest. It's a chance for you to confirm that this person has died so you know it, not so you're caught up in that grief. Go to the funeral. It makes a difference. So he is embalmed, and one of the things on this that you'll see, most of the cost is for fabric. White fabric, black fabric. Black fabric we know, grief. Why the white? Remember, he was shot on Easter Friday. Much of the symbology will have Easter motif, and we'll talk about that. Okay, funeral train, this is how he goes back home. The thought was that he would be buried in Washington, D.C. Why not? We have the place all set up. George Washington didn't get buried there. This is ready to go. Everybody wanted it except Mary Todd Lincoln, and she said, no, I want him buried back home. Lincoln talked about a specific cemetery. That's where he's going to go. And he may be a president, but he's also a father. I want him buried with his family. Other than that, she had nothing to do with the funeral. She did not go to the funeral. Her life was a mess after he died. The funeral train, this is the route they would take. It was about 25 miles an hour through the country, 10, 15 miles an hour through the towns. And like I say, the railroad way was packed with people. Lit funeral pyres, dressed in black, sobbing. They even had to have a special holiday after, for a period of days, I think it was 40 days, basically saying, we've got to stop this. It's time to move on. The country was so distraught. If you remember your emotions, the way you felt after 9/11, maybe after Kennedy's assassination, if you were alive then, you remember that. Multiply that by 10. The funeral train car, there was 8 of those. One held the president and his son, Willie. 6 held mourners, and 1 held the honor guard. There was a total of 800 Union soldiers that were a part of the honor guard. It was it was a really big deal to be on the honor guard. In fact, they were all given the Congressional Medal of Honor just for being in the honor guard. In the early 1900s, Congress said, we want that just to be for valorous conduct, so they rescinded all of those given to the Union soldiers. I asked the guy, how do you do that? He said, well, you can keep it, you can just never wear it again. All right. Now we know. There's only one photograph of Abraham Lincoln at his own funeral. Now, how can that be? Well, when Stanton was the Secretary of War, he said it was forbidden. He did not want any picture of the president taken, and so this is the only photograph that was taken. A photographer from Albany broke the rules, went to the funeral in Chicago, took some pictures, and then they arrested him, and they broke all his equipment, and broke the plates, and threw him in jail. And this is the only surviving plate. It was sent to Washington, D.C., and then it was lost until 1965. So here's the question. If there's no picture of the president at his own funeral, did he really die? You thought that Elvis was the only person we talked about with this, didn't you? This will become a big topic of conversation for the next 36 years. This is where we figure out what the coffin looked like, because here it is right here. It is not a casket, it is a coffin. Sir, tell me your name. Terry? Stand up, Terry. Okay, now coffins are made to fit. How tall are you, Terry? How tall?
5'8".
5'8". So we would make this coffin to fit about an inch all the way around. It would be wide through the shoulders and narrow at the feet. Go ahead, Terry. You got that written down, Bob?
Yeah.
Oh,
And by the way, I'll just interject that some of the Hutterite colonies around here still do that. They build a casket to fit the body.
You know, when you walk into a clothing store and the guy knows what size suit you are, I was talking to an embalmer at the funeral home, and they were telling me that a casket has about 24 inches on the inside. And I said, that seems kind of tight. I don't know that I would fit in that. And he went, you're 21, you're fine. It's good to know. Anyway, so, where was I? So here is the coffin that is built for Lincoln. He is 6'4", 165. So the casket is 6'6", and it's narrow like he is. It's made out of solid walnuts. It is lined with lead. It has black cloth on the outside, white satin on the inside, and covered with silver accoutrements. It is considered extremely elaborate for a coffin of its day. It is $1,500, which is a lot of money back in 1865. This is the coffin that goes around the country and people walk by. This coffin, as I said, has elements of white and black. Here's the symbology that was used. So here we have a picture in what's going on in New York. You can see that we have a bust of George Washington, who is the father, and we have the body of the son, who dies for the cause greater than himself. And lilies are throughout. So the theme of Easter is projected onto not only the service, but in church sermons throughout the North in particular. You see, John Wilkes Booth planned on shooting Lincoln on the Ides of March, March 15th, and saying he is a tyrant. He makes a mistake, gets delayed, he shoots him on Good Friday, and the whole thing flips upside down.
Bringing them out? No.
Okay? So Terry, if you don't mind, for the purposes of this, would you mind being from Washington, D.C.? So Terry's in charge of everything in Washington, D.C. And ma'am, tell me your name. Deborah. All right, Deborah, let's say you're from New York City, okay, Deborah? Now, you see, thanks to the telegraph, newspapers, and everything else, you can read in detail what Terry has done in Washington, D.C. And you're in charge of everything in New York City. What do you think? You're going to copy it? Oh, no, you're not. No, 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 no. You're from New York. Better! That's what I want, better. So let's look and see what Terry has done. Here is the hearse here. You can see it here. Somber, black, very dignified. Do you notice what's interesting about the flags in Terry's funeral service? They're not at half-mast, are they? Remember, we have not had a president die yet. We don't know what to do. The flag at half-mast protocol, I did a little research on this, is a spontaneous thing usually talked about in naval situations. So when the ship comes in the harbor and the captain has died, they put the flag at half-mast so they can see that as he's coming in the harbor. The idea of a head of state and what do we do, that's still being in play. And depending on who you talk to from periods of the time, we get interplay of half-mast or no half-mast. That's one of the great things about history. I've read in this topic and read in this topic and read in this topic, and the more I read, the less I know. It's like having 28 watches. You never really know what time it is. So, this crowd is diverse. It's mixed. We have both blacks and whites at this funeral. Segregation is in every state of the Union, North and South. But it is determined that because of his importance and how much the black population revered him, that if they are not allowed full access, there will be riots. So all parts of the funeral ceremony for Lincoln, blacks are invited to participate. Okay? Ah, smart thinking. Nice job. You see how it was, what's the name again? Deborah. Oh, yeah. Deborah. See how Deborah added the extra gewgaws here? Terry, she kind of trumped you a little bit, didn't she? Put some more things. Sadly for Deborah, people are paying attention in other cities, and we're about to see this continue as we head further towards, look at this, Columbus. Enormous. They've added an extra layer, they've added more horses. Columbus, they hold it outside because they have to. There's simply not a building big enough for the mobs of people who want to be a part of saying goodbye to Abraham Lincoln. Springfield, look at that, hearse. That is used only once for this service, and it is put on display. It is later destroyed in a fire, and it is unbelievable the amount of effort put into saying goodbye. Okay. Deborah puts this up in New York. She puts this funeral arch, "We mourn a nation's loss." Deborah also was a little bit don't know what to do with the flags, so the flags are full up here. See that in the background? Not a very good picture, but you can see it. And so when we look at the idea of a funeral arch, other people decide that's a good idea, and they start copying it. Here's one in Michigan City, Indiana, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until we get to Chicago, and look at that. My goodness gracious, look at that funeral arch, and look at, can you see the hearse? Can you see it here? It has now become a stage on wheels. And the crowds get bigger and bigger. New York, 500,000 people. You can understand that. It's a big city. Chicago, 500,000 people. It's still a booming town, but it is so crowded in Chicago that the sidewalks are collapsing from the weight of people. Ladies are told in New York and Chicago that if you go, do not wear a bustle skirt or you will be crushed and suffocated in the mob of people. It is incredible the amount of people who go to see. And here he is in Springfield, his hometown. I like to show this photograph because it, I think, puts in perspective what's starting to happen from here on. I'll pick out, let's say, maybe this guy right here. I don't know who this man is. I don't know what he did. I've been a banker, attorney, grocer. But it doesn't matter what he did, because for the rest of his life and beyond, he is marked by what part he held in Lincoln's life and death. I give this presentation all the time, all over, and invariably, somebody at the end patiently waits to tell me how they are either related to Abraham Lincoln or they have a piece of his memorabilia. It is amazing. I was in a bar in Hermosa, about half the size of this room, log cabin, sawdust floor, 5 cowboys giving this presentation. I get done, it's dim. Remember the show Bonanza, Hoss? He kind of looked like Hoss. Had a belt like so, like a belt, like a dinner plate. Big hat. I'm putting my stuff away, and he says, "Hey," and I look around, he's this big guy, and I can't hardly see him. And I look at him in the dim light. He's crying. And he said, "Sure was something, wasn't he?" Turned around and he left. Lincoln collectibles continue to grow. Everything about Lincoln continues to fascinate and draw. He is buried in Springfield Oak Ridge Cemetery. This is the cemetery he was visiting with his wife. He said, that's a beautiful place. That's why he's buried there. It's a new cemetery. It's out in the sticks. It's out in the field in the sticks. And so that is where they build this enormous tomb. And you don't build something like that in just 2-3 weeks. So he is temporarily interred until 1872. And then in the ceremony, he is buried with his son, Willie, who died in Washington, D.C., Eddie, who died in Springfield, and Tad, who recently expired. And so they have a ceremony, and this is about halfway completed. This coffin here has deteriorated, so they decide not to bury him in this, but they have a really elaborate wrought iron casket, one to last the ages. Beautiful thing. It was about this much too long for the vault, so they couldn't use it. So Clarence, they kept the vault, but they got a different casket. There you go. So, and they swapped out a temporary casket, a cedar casket, and that is what he's entombed in. Until the year 1876, and now things start to get a little squirrely. Because there is a counterfeit ring in Chicago. Their chief engraver has been jailed in Joliet, and they decide that the way to get him out is to kidnap the body of the president and hold it for ransom for $200,000. They'll bury it in a sand dune in Indiana. Pretty clever. They probably shouldn't have thought of the idea in a bar in Chicago. Because sitting right next to them at the next table is a Secret Service agent who's listening to everything. And they are caught red-handed. That's the bad news. The good news is, it's not illegal. In the state of Illinois, there is no law against body snatching. All they can get them on is stealing a used casket. It's a misdemeanor. 18 months and they're out, and now the Lincoln Preservation Committee is worried sick because this structure was designed more like a church and cathedral, you know, windows above ground, in the middle of the country at night. How are we going to... So they decide they're going to steal their own body. They get up in the middle of the night, and there's tunnels underneath this. So they get into one of the tunnels, they dig down, and they hit water. So they find another spot, and they dig down, and they hit water again. So they take the body, and they hide it in the corner and cover it with construction debris for 2 years, till things calm down. Then they put another vault up, and now they rebuild this structure. So in 1886, it's more like a fort. It's got an indestructible brick and mortar vault. He's entombed, there's a ceremony, it's perfect, we're done. Except this spire, this tower, is so heavy that it starts to sink and break the indestructible brick and mortar vault. So now they have to start all over again. They take it all apart. And what do you think is the most commonly asked question when people go to visit Lincoln's tomb for all of this period? What is the number one question they're being asked? Is he really there? Where is he? Because I never saw a picture, right? And Robert Todd Lincoln, the surviving son, is tired of becoming America's favorite parlor game, Where Is My Dad Really? So he allows them to disinter the body one last time before final burial in 1900, 1901, somewhere in that universe. So, he gets a hold of the Lincoln Preservation Committee. They agree they're going to look at the body one last time. They alert the media that if they want to come, they can. And all of the media say unanimously, no, never. How macabre, how grotesque. changed their standards since then? Just an open question, I don't know exactly. But at any rate, we don't have any pictures of what happens. So what we have is the memory of a 10-year-old boy named M.O. Mortensen, whose dad says, "Come along, son, you might learn something." So they go. The workers carry in the coffin, lift off the lid. The carapace is copper. It's been soldered in place. So with chisels, they peel it loose to about waist height. And there he is. M.O. Mortensen said it looked like he was taking a nap. He was so perfectly preserved. He said it looked like you could have touched him on the shoulder and he was sat up. His face was about 3 shades darker than normal. There was a little bit of mildew on bow tie he was wearing. Other than that, it was without a doubt Abraham Lincoln. So, they put the lid back on. This time they lowered the body into the ground, surrounded by a big, huge steel cage that surrounded all of the coffins of the family. And they poured the whole works over with concrete so that nobody could start this, "Where is Abraham Lincoln?" He is here. May he rest in peace. I give this presentation, like I say, all over the place to all different age groups. Just about a few months ago, at the end of the school year, I gave it to a group of 5th graders. I said, "Do you have any questions?" A little girl raised her hand, and I said, "Yes." "Were you there?" I was out in Sturgis to a whole school assembly. Another girl, you know, they sit cross-legged in the gym lab floor. "Oh, so what's your question?" "Was he happy?" I love that question. We like the thought of the people we admire who are our heroes. We want them to be happy. Was Abraham Lincoln happy? No. Very difficult life. Full of ambition. I mean, he wasn't just born in a log cabin. He was born on a dirt floor in a log cabin. The struggles he had in his life, the setbacks, and then finally when he achieves political ambition, it is in the worst part of our country's history, where he has to watch hundreds of thousands of people die under indirect or direct order of his own hand. Personal sacrifices, pilloried in the media for 4 years. I'm so glad he had that one day, that Friday. But I will say this. I think he was satisfied. Do you see the difference? I think he saw the course that was laid out for him, and he did not deviate from that course. He did not equivocate on his standards, and he did what he thought he was supposed to do and never backed away from that. And in that way, I think you could say he was satisfied. To call him happy would not be to describe his personality. He was an interesting fellow in that he was very funny. People liked him, but he was naturally melancholy. You know, back before TV and radio, when people would entertain themselves, they would tell stories or recite poems that they had memorized. And Lincoln, I'll just give you a few lines of this poem. Lincoln loved this poem. He said it so many times that people thought, he was always reciting it. People said, "Did you write that?" And he said, "No, but I would give any amount of money to have penned such a masterful work." And I think this poem will explain his personality, his temperament, and perhaps his philosophy. It's called Why Should the Spirit of Mortal Be Proud? It was written by a Scot named William Knox. Oh, why should the spirit of mortal be proud? Like a swift, fleeting meteor, a fast flying cloud, a flash of the lightning, a break of the wave, man passes from life to rest in the grave. The leaves of the oak and the willow shall fade and be scattered around and together be laid, and the young and the old and the low and the high shall molder to dust and together shall lie. The infant, a mother attended and loved, the mother, that infant's attention who proved, the husband, that mother and infant who blessed, each all are away to their dwellings of rest. The maid, on whose cheek, on whose brow, and whose eye shone beauty and pleasure, her triumphs are by. And the memory of those who loved her and praised are alike from the mind of the living erased. For we are the same our fathers have been. We see the same sights our fathers have seen. We drink the same stream, we view the same sun, and run the same course our fathers have run. The thoughts we are thinking, our fathers would think. From the death we are shrinking, our fathers would shrink. To the life they were clinging, we also will cling, but it speeds for us all like the bird on a wing. 'Tis the wink of an eye, 'tis the draught of a breath, from the blossom of health to the paleness of death, from the gilded saloon to the bier and the shroud. Why should the spirit of mortal be proud? I want to thank Bob Ellsworth for bringing the casket in. It is at no small expense or effort. So make sure that you say thanks to Bob, and thank you for honoring our president, and thank you for your time. Thank you. Anybody has a question?
We have about 3 minutes if anybody has a question. Anybody have any? Go ahead. There's probably some.
Yes, sir.
There's one local connection that might be of interest to this group. General William Henry Harrison Beadle, one of the first, I believe he was the third president of our college here, now Dakota State University, served in the Union Army under Grant. He was in Washington. They were defending the White House and the Capitol at that time of the assassination. And General Beadle was on the honor guard on the train from Washington back to Springfield, Illinois.
Wow. That's a great story. Yes, sir.
We'll put it, A.G. Hollenbeck, that founded this funeral home. His father was a member of the Wisconsin militia that served during the Civil War. And done a little genealogy on it. I've got where his wife applied for his pension. He died about 4 years after the war. And I've got most of it.
One of the things that comes out of the Civil War was the tremendous grief afterwards. Alcoholism was called the soldier's disease. It was so common, affected so many families, that when people say, how in the world could the country have passed prohibition? You needed to live at the time of all the alcoholics after the Civil War who were dealing with that. Their families said, we got to do something. So in a strange way, prohibition is one of the outcomes of the Civil War. Very difficult time in our nation's history. Yes?
Do you have any idea why the resurgence of interest in Lincoln? It seems that the number of non-fictional books that are now on the market have just proliferated.
Right.
And there must be quite a sale over those. I know they just...
Well, for example, she's talking about the popularity of Lincoln, and there are more books written about Jesus Christ than anybody else. Number 2 is Lincoln. He passed up Napoleon about 10 years ago, and he's going like crazy. Abraham Lincoln, in fact, my daughter, who was a senior in college for Christmas last year, gave me a book, Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Slayer.
I think it's a movie.
And she took me to the movie for my birthday, so, for some historical background. Here's the thing about Lincoln. He is such a fascinating person because he's so enigmatic. He did not talk about his personal life. He did not talk about his background. He destroyed a lot of that or refused to talk about it. And after he died, a lot of records were stolen or were destroyed as well. His son burned many records. And I asked him why. He said, I don't want the children of these people to be persecuted. Remember now, there were all kinds of intrigues and conspiracies. So his life is mysterious. And it's also miraculous because he went from absolutely nowhere to become, and a lot of it is not made up. He was a man of tremendous integrity. And I could tell stories, I don't want to because I'm cutting into Bob Hardy here, but there are many anecdotes that when you read them, they're factual, you go, wow, that was honest, or wow, that guy had integrity, or wow, in those same circumstances, I sure wouldn't have behaved that way. He was really a great statesman. Yes, sir.
In my own humble view, I see Lincoln exemplifying the very core value of Jesus Christ, and that is that all people are of equal value in God's eyes.
Yeah.
And that's part of the cornerstone of our democracy, that we're all of equal, we all have equal rights.
So Terry, just to piggyback on that, during the Sioux Uprising, which we know happened this whole area was in turmoil because the Indians had killed many people. And 308, if I'm not mistaken, Indians were rounded up to be hanged in Mankato. And this was a midterm election cycle, and Lincoln was not doing well, very badly. And so when he said before the hanging goes, I want to see the cases for each man. He says, what are you talking about? Well, I'm a lawyer, and they look at the cases. He said, Mr. President, it doesn't make a difference about the cases. We have a problem in the Minnesota Territory, and we have to take care of it, or you're going to lose the midterm election. And he looked at the guy, and he said, I will not trade the souls of men for votes. How much political hay did the American Indian vote have at that time? None. So that's a great, sometimes a story tells more than mere facts. Thank you, Terry. And God bless you, everybody. Have a great day.